Done. Thank you for the staff who have worked so hard over the last half an hour on these issues, and to the members of the committee for your attention to detail. Just while we get back together again, I just got some feedback from some of the members of the public who are here, who just commended all the committee members on their attention to detail and said that's quite unusual in their experience having watched Parliament. So I thought it was a very kind thing to say. So just acknowledging all of you for that. So where are we at? Work's been done over the lunch break on the questions that have been asked, and hopefully recommendations that that the Mayor will move and I will second. We'll pop those up, but I also have an amendment from two IMSB members, Member Blair and Member Brown. So we'll just, to give people a chance to have a look at the recommendations. So we'll just do these the right way around. So the Mayor will move and I will second the recommendations when they come up. But we do just signal that there is an amendment that we will need to deal with first. Hang on. Right. It would have been quite. So.
Oops.
Oh no. Sorry, just sort out the technology for a moment. Okay. Just so that people are clear, what we'll do is we'll deal with the amendment first, which is the right thing to do, and the amendment from member. So, Renata, you want to, as the mover, and James seconder. Okay, I'll read it out if you like, and then I'll get you to speak to it. So basically moved by Renata Blair and seconded by James Brown, endorse option 5 plus implement a controlled area notice under the Biosecurity Act to manage kauri dieback. So that's the amendment, which Member Blair or Member Brown, if you'd like to talk to that.
Kia ora everyone. I think we've heard very strong support from the iwi, extremely strong support from all the environmental groups that have been here, even though they haven't presented today. They've put forward cases previously about the protection of the forests. We've also had a lot of non-Māori Pākehā people contact us socially and through the media around their support for Te Kawerā Maki and the full closure. And we've also heard from the local board and really sound, strategic, active steps that need to be taken. So I don't think we heard a really strong case put forward by the businesses out there. I thought that could have been stronger, but we've had an overwhelming response from those aforementioned groups. And having the controlled area notice under the Biosecurity Act will give us that extra ability as a council to approve groups such as businesses, such as the pest control groups and other organisations to meet the standards required to save this forest. So I strongly recommend that a controlled area notice under the Biosecurity Act to manage kauri dieback is included in any recommendation, including this one. And I commend the council for their diligence in this, what we call a kaupapa, because it is an extreme case that's before us. I don't think we could go to our families and our friends and say we were a part of a decision which allowed these trees, these taonga, the chiefs of the forest, to die. So I urge the council to continue with their diligence in the way that they do respect Māori, and they do respect the various groups that are concerned with the forest, to have a look at this this option 5 as an immediate measure, and then be able to open tracks which are effectively safe, and that we know 100% are safe for the public to use, or for those groups that have been approved to use. So thank you, Madam Chair. That's all I've got to say for this time. But
Member Brown, did you wish to speak? Okay, so speaking to the recommendation, to the amendment, Councillor Lee. No, not Councillor Lee, to the amendment? Okay, I just had you up. So this is just to the amendment.
I have an amendment
option.
in mind, Madam Chair, and that is to include the Waitaki Ranges Regional Park Management Plan in the recommendations. That's the only thing I had, but...
Okay, well, we can deal with that when we get
you.
to the other recommendations, if we get that far. Councillor Kathy Casey.
Yeah, I'd like to speak in support of the amendment as proposed by Member Blair. We've heard today from Te Kawarawa Amake, and I'd like you to again look at the letter that's attached that everybody has on their agenda. They told us that they've been ignored for umpteen years on the subject of kauri dieback. They said that we were politically lethargic.
This is the amendment.
And they said it was time to be bold and take action. They also said in 10 years the forest will be dead, so there'll be no tracks for the good folks who have commercial interests to take their people to. And that struck my heart, as did the testimony from James and from Renata. If we don't act now in the fullest sense, and that's why I was a wee bit disappointed with the report, and we're not going to go there because I've mentioned it earlier, but I would like to have seen option 5 explored fully so that we knew what the implications were, what the costs were. Another piece of paper arrived on our desk during the course of this meeting, which I'd like to refer members to, and that was a legal opinion from, I'm not sure, from our legal team. If you turn to the last page, page 16, it's about the principles of the Treaty of Waitangi. And what amazes me is when we listen to Māori at this table and when we don't. And I'm urging you today to listen. They came here in good faith. They made a very strong case. It's supported by the Independent Māori Statutory Board. And it's supported by our obligations under the Treaty of Waitangi. And I'll read you the section, just in case you haven't read through it. The principles of the treaty likely to be most relevant in making this decision are: bullet point 1, partnership, mutual good faith and reasonableness, mutual good faith. What we heard this morning was it hasn't been totally in good faith. They've felt ignored and frustrated. But the last bullet point, active protection. This involves the active protection of Māori interests retained under the treaty. It includes the promise to protect rangatiratanga and taonga. The taonga are here, left here for us to reflect on. That's what they asked us to do today. That's what this amendment does, and that's why everybody around this table should support it. It was supported by all the presenters this morning in one form or another, including Jack and Mel's and Nick. And these are people who do the hard yards on kauri dieback. They know their stuff. So I'm fully supportive, and I think we should give this a really good go.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm taking my speaking spot now because this actually is the recommendation after listening to all the various speakers today that I feel most comfortable with, and I commend members Blair and Brown for putting it up. There's an old saying, desperate times call for desperate measures, and that was the Greek physician Hippocrates who said that, and he said that for extreme diseases, extreme methods of cure as to restrictions are most suitable. And I think everything we have heard today, I think Hippocrates would be talking about, because we are told that the results from the survey conclude that the infestation of Kauri diobac has doubled up to 20%. We are told the park is now the most heavily diseased area known in New Zealand, and over half the substantial Kauri areas contain symptoms of infection. So if we were to draw yet another analogy with the war, we should be on a war footing here, and if we're on a war footing, why wouldn't you go to the starting point that we are actually told is the one that stands the best chance of success? Point 49. If closure of the park was able to be effectively implemented, it is expected that this option would give the most protection to Kauri of any of the options. So the officers have told us that if we want to deal with this crisis, that is where to start. And I think Member Blair quite rightly said that in the course of time, and it might be shorter time than others, if that was proving successful, then there could be some sort of rolling opening that might go to some of the issues of the concessionaires, who we know are going to display the sort of responsibility that's required in the ranges. So I would think, for clarity of message, and there's been a lot of talk today about the difficulties of dealing with the public, of public perception, how hard it is to get the public to do what we want them to do. I would say, with all due respect, that we've been sending out mixed messages, and the road we are proposing to go down is more likely to create that sort of confusion than a very clear statement. Te Kawerau have already made that very clear statement. They couldn't be any clearer. We've actually got an opportunity here to build on that clear statement and that sense of urgency. We know it's urgent. We know this is a crisis. Dr. Nick Waipara talked about a tipping point. Look at those graphs. Look at the little pie, how it's gone from that much to that much. What's it going to be next year? Is it going to be 3/4? So, without any sense of exaggeration, we are on a war footing here. So if we are, why not go to the point that stands the best chance of success and look at the psychology of dealing with the public? I'm assuming that there are a defined number of access points to the Waitakere Ranges, and I'm not talking about each individual track here, and that effective messaging, and by effective I mean messaging that hits anyone right in between the eyes that goes up there, would perhaps eliminate, I don't know, 80, 90% of the people, and then straight away we're down to 10% right from the word go. So you're dealing with far more manageable numbers rather than giving people potentially inbuilt excuses for being up, being on the wrong track, and trying to move people around. And I understand what the officers are saying in terms of the difficulties, but I guess what I'm saying is, well, why don't we try the most effective option to start off with, and perhaps we might be pleasantly surprised, because if the messaging is clear, then it's going to have to be a pretty distant individual that's then going to go in the face of public opinion or of monitoring that is actually more effective, because you're dealing with smaller numbers. So quite simply, Madam Chair, I would say that all the evidence we're given here points to the desirability of supporting this amendment as the most effective means of dealing with a crisis. It is a crisis. It's not something that can perhaps be managed piecemeal, or I thought we've sort of been down that route. Everyone acknowledges the work the council's done, but to a large extent we've already tried this. We can do the track improvements and the other things as we go along. We're not going to stop that. In fact, they're going to be more effective if in the meantime we're taking any use out, or as much use as physically possible out of the ranges. So I thank the members for putting up that amendment, and I'll be supporting it because it's the one that stands the best chance of success.
Thank you. Councillor Fletcher.
Oh, Madam Chair, I was just going to seek a request to have your recommendations put up, but I now have those. Thank you.
We've passed them around. We thought that would just be simpler for people to have them in front of them. Member Brown.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am reminded, I mentioned earlier this morning, the rāhui that does exist out at Umapuia.
Out where?
There is an education that awaits the community, whether there's a rāhui or otherwise. The matter won't disappear. The issues around the perception of community angst is one simply that I remain committed to my earlier comment, Madam Chair, is inevitable. So we heard very clearly that ko mate te rākau, ko mate te tangata. When the rākau, the tree, is dead, so are we. And I applaud my colleague, Member Blair, and our Māori board for supporting the stance that has been taken. And I do remind you all that although the fluffy feeling thing is this term around the principles of the treaty, it's a living, real thing when you have the treaty partner come before you, lay out their heart and soul. That's not principles. That's living, breathing the treaty. So the attempt to use principles and values, again, is not the desires expressed by Te Kawerau Āmaki this morning, and those desires have been implemented immediately by Māori, and that will include the cheeky ones that decide to compromise it, because we'll have those too. But we won't share with you how we reconcile those breaches with our people, because they will be reconciled regardless of what the political correct way of reconciling breaches are. And I do take the point of the public submissions this morning around, you have the power, not the potential of it, and that power should be expressed responsibly when it has that opportunity. And although we might feel we're being responsible today to take the fuzzy feel-good stuff, can I just suggest to us all that trouble awaits our grandchildren, if not our children, if it is that this taonga perishes within our lifetime, because the minute it perishes in their lifetime, they will look back at today's minutes. And you will be judged by your own grandchildren about your actions that you've taken today. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Mayor Goff.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I want to foreshadow my support for the alternative amendment in my and your names. And without any disrespect to the comments that have just been made, I can assure members Brown and Blair and councillors Casey and Watson, I feel just as intensely about the iconic nature of the kauri tree. It is a symbol of the best of our native forest, and we want to, in practice, do everything we can to ensure its survivability. Yes, we do have the power, James, to close the park. What is less clear is our power to enforce the enclosure of the park. And I just want to make this point, that those that observe the rāhui are not the people that will be deterred by the formal closure of the park. They will respect the rāhui and they will respect the closure. The people that we worry about are the people that are ignorant and irresponsible, that won't respect the rāhui and won't respect the closure. And the practical impact is what I would ask councillors to consider. The practical impact, for example, if we have a blanket closure to begin with, and people are determined to go in there, they will go in there without the benefit of the enhanced hygiene stations that we're talking about putting in place. If we close every path, then we will not be as able to redirect people to the paths that don't create a risk rather than those that do. My worry is that you will have perverse outcomes by a mass closure of the park as a whole. And, you know, taking away the hygiene stations, I think, are the clearest example of that. There is no way that we can simply close the park and ensure that nobody goes into it. Unless you were to put an electric fence or a razor wire fence around the park, which is absolutely impossible, you won't be able to stop people who want to go into the park doing so. I think the far better option, and the one that we have foreshadowed, is close to option 4, is the one that says we will do things that minimise the risk of the spreading of this disease. And I want to say that the most important decision that we make as councillors is not necessarily this decision today about stopping Kauri dieback. It will be about how you vote next week on the targeted rate to give us the money to actually do something practical to stop the spread of that disease. Because we can make a grand gesture and say, we're closing it. It won't make a damn bit of difference unless we put the investment in to making sure that we are doing something in practice to save the Kauri tree. And we're spending $3 or $4 million at the moment on stopping the spread of Kauri dieback. We're going to be spending, under the proposals under the 10-year budget, to increase that 20 to 30 times. That will give us the ability to put tracks in so that people aren't walking through the mud, which is the worst vector for spreading the disease. We're going to spend money on proper hygiene stations. We're going to spend money on decent education. These are the things that will make the difference. I listened very carefully to Jack Crow earlier today, and I thought he gave an excellent presentation. He was well informed, and I thought the board has worked conscientiously to come up with some practical solutions. And I think we need to continue to work with the board to put in place those practical protections. But let's start with where we can make the biggest difference. The biggest difference we can make if we adopt, as the foreshadowed motion that I hope you've got in front of you, takes us down the track of closing high risk and medium tracks, puts the money into enhancing the tracks in a way that will stop the spread of the disease, does the practical things that will make a difference on the ground. So with every respect, and I mean this genuinely, with every respect to those that are pushing for option 5, I think option 4, together with the budget that we will vote on next week to go to consultation, will have the greatest impact in terms of protecting our iconic tree and stopping the spread of Kauri dieback. So I will not be supporting option 5. I will be supporting a modified option 4. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I've got Councillor Newman and Councillor Walker, but can we please keep it short because we really do need to deal with this. Thank you, Councillor Newman.
Not speaking, Madam Chair. I've said nothing today in relation to this, but can I just ask, as a matter of process, what is the officer's recommendations are set out in the paper.
Yep.
I've got a document here which has a set of new recommendations. Now we've got the amendment. What is the primary recommendation?
Yep. Primary recommendation is Chair's recommendations, which are these ones that we have printed out here.
Okay.
The officer's recommendation were a guideline. As Chair, these are the recommendations I've worked on with staff, having listened to all of the information, but we had put across the desk, as one does, the request by our Independent Māori Statutory Board members to move an amendment to the Chair's recommendations, which is option 5. That's the amendment. This may end up as the substantive, but it is my Chair's recommendations, which is perfectly in line with process. Councillor Wayne Walker.
I'd like to agree with my colleague from the Albany Ward, Councillor Watson. I think what's being put up here, and when I say here I'm talking about the amendment on part of Member Blair, is very pragmatic. If the issue is around people walking, spreading the disease, then obviously, if you don't have people walking, you've gone a long way to solving the problem. And this problem is also a function of time, and it buys time. I'd suggest also that from a perspective of marketing, getting Aucklanders to understand, something as focused as this is going to be very, very easy for Aucklanders and others to understand. It goes to people taking personal responsibility not to go into this area, and equally, I would suggest that that is going to apply to other areas around the region. And when I say region, I'm not simply talking about the Auckland region, but everywhere from the Bay of Plenty north over the entire range of Kauri. So I support this. I would suggest also there's an opportunity for us to apply technology, CCTV cameras, many other things that we know that we can use to monitor people, to regulate the circumstance, to educate people as best we can. So I support this.
Okay, I've no other speakers. We're going to put the
Madam Chair?
amendment.
I had a quick clarification question, if
Yep,
that's all right,
that's
through
fine.
you. And it's just regard to your recommendations, Madam Chair. Can I ask that? Just
No,
on-
we're just dealing with the amendment.
By division.
So remember, we're just dealing with Member Blair's amendment. Then if that doesn't pass, then we will get on to the recommendations that you've got in front of you.
Thank you.
So we'll do this by division. Thanks, Tam.
Just in terms, it wasn't delete F either on that.
Just replacing clause E. Okay. D.
Councillor Hulse,
No.
Member Blair,
4.
Member Brown,
4.
Councillor Casey,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor,
No.
Councillor Clow,
No.
Councillor Cooper,
Against.
Councillor Darby,
Against.
Mayor Goff,
No.
Councillor Fletcher,
Yes.
Councillor Hills,
No.
Councillor Mike Lee,
No.
Councillor Newman,
No.
Councillor Sayers,
No.
Councillor Simpson,
Against.
John Walker, Councillor Wayne Walker,
Yes?
Councillor Watson,
4.
4, 5, 6. It is lost by 11 to 7.
Okay. Thank you for that, and thank you for the speakers and the move and seconder of that. So we move then on to the substantive motions, which the Mayor and I have worked on. I hope that there will be some discussion, but hopefully not too lengthy discussion on these, and I'll invite the Mayor to speak.
I've already done that, Madam
Done
Chair,
that.
and I'm
You're happy?
desperate to go and give a speech somewhere else shortly
I
if I
think
can.
we have probably talked ourselves almost to a standstill. As the seconder, I would just like to say that this is an exceedingly complex and challenging issue, and along with Councillor Cooper, having represented this area for the last 20-odd years and having been at the heart of putting together the legislation for the protection of the Waitakere Ranges, and having worked closely and in a personal capacity with Te Kaurau Amaki, today has been one of the most challenging in my entire political career. So it is, though, with the responsibility of pragmatism that I support these recommendations. It also opens up a huge opportunity to really tackle this head on and to take the lead from the local board, who have been tireless in their promoting of this as a critical issue. And it does give us the chance to finally move some of the protection of the ranges and the practical work that needs to be done further along and more quickly. So I'm happy to second that. Councillor Clow.
Well, as the only councillor who's actually living in the Waitakere Ranges, I just want to speak, and I haven't been there or had family connections for 1,000 years, but I've been there close to 60, and personally I've been living there consistently for 50 years. The actual Waitakere Ranges Heritage Park also is part of my ward as well, which is the faux ward, and I will say for many years I represented New Lynn, which included Titirangi, and a little bit further out for many years. And this breaks my heart, these trees. Our section in Titirangi has 20 plus karo trees, including some very substantial trees on them, and touch wood, they're all in pretty good shape, except for the previous owners who did a bit of trimming. But we've got some pretty magnificent trees there, and yet I go across the road, right across the road, to some friends, and they have had a number of trees that they've had to have taken down because they had died and therefore were a risk to their house. So it's only, hopefully it's not a matter of time, and hopefully the road's a barrier, but it worries us. I respect the rahui that's been put in place by Te Karawamaki, and I will say it works. I've observed that Karekare, the rahui there, has actually led to a regeneration of the shellfish, and by and large most people seem to respect it, including recent migrants after much explanation and that, and things seem to be coming back. However, I do think it's impractical to close, so I'm not going to speak to that. So I just really want to say to those, if this goes through today, for all the many groups that are here today that obviously would like a stronger measure of closing, is encourage you, everyone in the audience, to make sure you do come back and make strong representations in the LTP on our targeted rate, and you're going to have 2 or maybe 3 options there, but make very strong representations, including accessing all your groups and all your memberships in various entities to actually get in and give strong support for the stronger measure of, or the stronger budget measure, which is going to give us the money to be able to do things which can include, obviously, doing the tracks properly, etc., whether it's not paving them, but wood or whatever. So I just say we need that to throw the resources at it, but I just emphasise again, the rahui can work in its own way, and we're evidently, anecdotally, there already is a little bit of feedback that it's working, and just in the case of a few days, so let's just hope for that. But yeah, it breaks my heart to see what's happened out there, and we haven't got it in the Hanuas, thank goodness, but I just had information that it's pretty rife through the Kaimai Ranges, so it's not a unique thing just for us here, so I will support this.
Thank you, Councillor Clow. Councillor Sayers.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As I mentioned a bit earlier, it's probably just clarification around this recommendation, and that's around if perhaps there's a focus there, and our consideration going into the LTP. In the interim, Madam Chair, obviously there could be a time delay in that. Just the intention of the recommendation, what might be happening in the interim, if I could get a little bit of guidance on that.
So that's a combination of, if you read D in conjunction with that, it makes sense. I'll get Dean to explain.
Thank you.
So the intention was in foreseeing that as an issue between now and an approved LTP. In effect, the combination of recommendations enables staff to get going, acknowledging that current budgets are likely to be inadequate. But if your vote today is in favour of these, then you're also approving staff to commence the necessary work, and that we would come back to you in February 2018 with long-term plan capital and operating expenditure impacts. So we didn't want to wait for that. We recognise the need for urgency, hence we get going now, and we'll come to you with a budget for the long-term plan that enables the ongoing implementation of these recommendations.
Very good. Yeah, thank you, Dean.
Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm very pleased to support these recommendations, the motion that has been put up by the Mayor and yourself. But in so doing, I really want to acknowledge the staff that we have in our biosecurity teams. They are outstanding. Some of them have come from the Department of Conservation, others from elsewhere. But I think if they had had the opportunity to have authored this report, we could have probably saved ourselves several hours today. I think that we have a resource in these people who are outstanding, and I really want to see their voice, or hear their voice, being heard as we go forward. It is a matter of national significance that we try and keep Kari dieback out of the Hunua Ranges. We are at a tipping point. We know all of these things, but too often it doesn't translate into action. So I'm heartened by what I have just heard from the Chief Operating Officer, and I really, really hope that everybody can support it. But this has been an issue that we've let slip. I want to hand it to Linda Cooper. Along with Linda, some of us worked very hard during the last LTP to try and get funds in, and we didn't give sufficient weighting to it. And I tell the story, and you might have heard it before, but I recall as the chair of the parliamentary committee that scrutinised the vote for the Department of Conservation, on an annual basis, the staff would turn up and Bill Mansfield would be, with a government majority, including Sir Robin Gray, who was then the Speaker, do you have sufficient funds to undertake the work that is before you? Yes, 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 yes. And then Cave Creek happened and people disappeared to the hills. And what I would say to all of our staff is, when you know in your heart of hearts that something really needs strong advocacy and representation, don't be afraid to speak the truth, because our children will not thank us for it if we don't get it right. And as our mokos, as Member Brown has already said. So I am pleased the recommendations are where they are, but it would have been nice to have seen a bit more action before now, but it's going to come. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fitch. I just want to reassure you, I wasn't too sure the point you were making about biosecurity. Phil Brown is our manager of biosecurity, so the report is written by our biosecurity and our regional parks people. So we just need to be really clear on that.
I guess it comes to recommendations, and that was sort of what I started to interrogate with questions, but I don't want to prolong the debate.
Oh. Just wanted to stick up for our biosecurity manager, who has been working and living, eating, sleeping this issue forever.
Madam Chair, I would not want it suggested for a moment that I am doing anything other than applauding our manager. Thank you.
Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess for me this is really hard because a lot of our community out west want the ranges closed. But for me, I've looked at the 3 tests in the Local Government Act around good decision making, and I think in these recommendations we have taken those 3 notes to good decision making into account. For me, the Rahui, at which we attended on Sunday, is like all good things Māori, is give us a good kick up our taraperepe. And, you know, if nothing else, that is what it has done.
Exactly.
And 3 years ago, when I found out that we were going to lose all our money for Kari dieback, it's a different environment now. I think people just voted to keep it in to stop hearing my voice. But I think the thing is now we really are taking notice. And I mean, I'm signalling that I'm going to go for the highest environmental targeted rate we can get. We need that 114 million. It's a hell of a lot more than 650,000. That we had last time. We were not taking it seriously enough, though probably I think our staff were, but we were being too tight. For me, what this means is we can invest in research. This is absolutely critical for Auckland and our country. And you know, we have a groundswell of people in our community. There's so much public goodwill around environmental initiatives now, and especially our beloved ranges, that I think people want to do something, they just don't know what to do, and now we can have the resources to actually help them do the right thing, and I think that's important. For me, closing, you know, I think New Zealanders are great at, you know, the rules are made to be broken, and I think sometimes when you shut something off for them, it's just a challenge. It's a challenge to let's get in, and so for me, this is a really good approach, and I hope that when we get that extra 114 million, we can put a hell of a big dollop into ramping this up. I think it's important. But what we've also recognised is that we have some really good concessionaires, and that's important too, because in the ranges, in the Heritage Area Act, it talks about looking at all the users. It talks about all the different well-beings, and so I think we've got to find a balance. But I absolutely hear it's critical that we keep people away from those infected areas and we upgrade our tracks. And we've heard from our staff for years that we should be doing that. I've heard it from the rangers, we haven't got enough money. So we need to have the gumption now. And for people that want that, they've also got to vote for the long-term plan, because only 10 people did last time. So I hope we have a full complement of people actually putting, you know, their words into action. So that's all I need to say, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Councillor Lee.
Yep, thank you, Madam Chair. I support your recommendations. I think they are a wise approach and the appropriate reaction to what really is a crisis, and one there are high public expectations on us dealing with. We can't lock up and walk away. We can't lock out the public. We have to actually intervene. The 256 kilometres of track, at least 140 kilometres of those tracks are totally free of curry, so locking up everything is not a sensible option. If it were, if it could provide the cure, the remedy, then I would support the lock-up. It won't. This thing is a formidable enemy, and we don't have all the answers to dealing with it as yet. We need to put pressure on the government for better research into this organism, because it's been, the amount of research that's gone into this problem has been relatively minimal, and that has to change. In terms of our role, I think in terms of active intervention, I think we have to consider the merits of phosphite treatment, which I'm disappointed we haven't heard much about today, but reports of phosphite treatment seem to be very positive. Phosphite barriers have been mentioned. I think that's important. Board walking is important, as the Mayor has pointed out. The film on the soil in which this pathogen moves, in other words mud, is a major problem, and board walking provides a solution to help quarantine that pathogen. So it's a whole raft of things that we have to become active and interventionists about without locking the public out of the whole ranges. That just is not reasonable or sustainable, will bring no credit on anyone. There's no easy answer, and that is not one either. That would have required a massive policing effort to enforce. I want to also note, Madam Chair, that we need to elevate the priority of this in our own budget. I look forward to the Mayor's the next budget, and I support the targeted rate, but I think we need to bring forward expenditure, and perhaps the targeted rate on tourism that is already in place. Maybe if we're short of money or want to balance the budget, perhaps we could divert money from that fund, which is meant for infrastructure, and no more important tourist infrastructure